In the year 2000, Shelby, North Carolina, was the kind of place where you still left your doors unlocked at night. A quiet, working-class town. Fields stretched out beyond the neighborhoods, and the main highway cut through with little more than gas stations, a handful of shops, and the occasional truck stop. In a town like Shelby, the worst danger parents worried about was a skinned knee or a bad grade on a report card. Not the kind of tragedy that would soon unfold. On Oakcrest Drive lived the Degree family. Harold, a furniture company employee who worked long days, Aquila, a devoted mother and school employee, and their two children, 10-year-old O'Brien and their younger daughter, 9-year-old Asha Degree. The kids were close in age, shared a room, and had grown up under the watchful eyes of parents who kept them busy with school, sports, and church. Asha was not the kind of child to wander off. She was careful, shy with strangers, but outgoing with friends. She played basketball, kept up with her homework, and loved to read. Her teachers described her as a model student. At home, she was a girl who still clung to her stuffed animals at night, a child who had never spent the night away from her family without permission. Sunday, February 13th, began normally. That morning, the family attended church together, as they did every week. In the afternoon, Asha had a basketball game with her school team. The game was a tough one, and she fouled out early. Her team lost. Witnesses later recalled she seemed disappointed but not unusually upset. Afterward, the Degrees visited relatives, then returned home before dark. That evening was quiet. The kids settled into their shared bedroom. O'Brien remembers they stayed up talking for a while before drifting off to sleep. Outside, the February air had a bite to it, and a cold rain began to fall. The storm would grow heavier as the night went on. Sometime after midnight, Asha awoke. Maybe it was the sound of the rain against the window. Maybe it was something else entirely. Something that would remain a mystery forever. She got out of bed without disturbing her brother. In the dark, she slipped into her clothes. A white long-sleeved t-shirt, white pants, and white sneakers. She reached for her small black backpack, one she had packed earlier with clothes, personal items, and a few keepsakes. No one knows when she packed it or why. Her parents were asleep in the next room. The house was silent except for the ticking of the living room clock and the rain outside. Asha walked through the hallway, past the front door she had passed thousands of times before, and into the night. She left no note. Around 3:30 a.m., a driver heading south on Highway 18 noticed something strange in the headlights. A small figure walking along the shoulder of the road, head down against the rain. As the car drew closer, it became clear. It was a young girl. She was alone. The driver slowed but continued on. They thought it was odd, but perhaps she lived nearby. About 10 minutes later, another motorist spotted her. They slowed, uneasy. It was bitter cold. The road was nearly empty. This was not a place for a child to be at night. They turned around, intending to offer help. But when they reached the spot again, she was gone. No one saw her turn off into the woods. There were no lights nearby, no houses in sight. Just wet pavement, tall grass on either side, and darkness. That brief moment, a child alone in the rain before vanishing into the night, was the last time anyone would see 9-year-old Asha Degree alive. A normal Sunday had ended in a mystery that would consume her family, her community, and investigators for decades to come. Morning came to Shelby on Monday, February 14th, 2000. Valentine's Day. The rain from the night before had tapered off, leaving the streets damp and glistening under a pale winter sky. Inside the Degree home, it began like any other school day. Around 6:30 a.m., Harold and Aquila began getting ready for work. O'Brien, still half asleep, was stirred awake. But when Aquila went to wake Asha, she found her bed empty. At first, she thought maybe her daughter had already gone to the bathroom or had woken up early and was in the living room. But she wasn't there. The backpack she often carried to school was gone, and so were some of her clothes. Panic didn't hit instantly. In those first moments, the Degrees wondered if Asha had walked to a relative's house or maybe gone to a friend's home. But the feeling didn't last. They quickly realized this wasn't just unusual. It was impossible. Asha had never left the house on her own without telling them. By 6:45 a.m., calls were being made. First to relatives, then to neighbors. Nobody had seen her. Minutes later, the Degrees called the Shelby Police Department. Officers arrived within minutes, and by 7 a.m., the search began. The first sweep was close to home. Police combed the streets, knocked on doors, checked nearby yards and sheds. Within hours, more help arrived. Deputies from the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office, K-9 units, and volunteers from the community. The search grew rapidly. Officers walked shoulder to shoulder through fields and woods near the Degrees' home. Roadsides were checked. Creeks and drainage ditches were searched. But the weather, which had been cold and wet all night, worked against them. Any scent trail the dogs might have picked up was likely washed away by the rain. That morning, word of her disappearance spread quickly through town. Flyers were printed. Local radio stations broadcast her description: 9 years old, about 4 feet 6, 60 pounds, brown hair, brown eyes, wearing a white long-sleeved shirt and white pants. Then came the first major lead. Several drivers called in to say they had seen a girl matching Asha's description walking along Highway 18 between 3:30 and 4 a.m. One man recalled trying to speak to her, but she ran into the woods. The sightings matched the exact window of time when she had left her home. For investigators, the timeline began to take shape. But the meaning behind it was still a mystery. Why would a shy, cautious child head out into the rain before dawn, walk down a rural highway, and vanish when approached? By nightfall, search crews had covered miles of terrain. Helicopters scanned from above. Officers waded through brush and mud. Neighbors handed out coffee and food to volunteers who refused to stop. Yet, as the first day of searching ended, there was nothing. No sign of Asha. No discarded belongings. No footprints in the mud. The Degrees went to bed that night without their daughter. The image of her empty bed burned into their minds. The search would continue into the next day, but an unsettling truth was beginning to settle over everyone involved. A 9-year-old girl had vanished in plain sight, and no one knew why. The morning after Asha's disappearance, February 15th, 2000, the search intensified. News crews arrived in Shelby. The Degrees' quiet neighborhood became a staging area for law enforcement vehicles, volunteers, and search dogs. The image of Asha, smiling in her school photo, hair neatly parted, was now on every local TV broadcast, every newspaper front page, every flyer stapled to telephone poles. The Cleveland County Sheriff's Office coordinated the ground search while the FBI joined in to assist with investigative resources. Detectives began interviewing anyone who might have seen or spoken to Asha in the days before she vanished. They went to her school, her basketball coach, her classmates, and neighbors. No one could point to a single reason she would have left home willingly. The family's house was checked and rechecked. There were no signs of forced entry. No fingerprints or physical evidence suggested a struggle. Everything pointed to one fact. She had walked out on her own, but why? Meanwhile, the tips kept coming in. Some were dead ends, sightings that turned out to be other children, or misidentifications. But one tip stood out. a truck driver traveling down Highway 18 that night, said he had seen Asha running into the woods when he slowed down to check on her. The location matched other motorists' reports. Detectives focused on that spot. They brought in teams to comb the wooded area just off the highway, a tangle of wet underbrush and pine trees. For hours they searched, but the ground yielded nothing. No clothing, no backpack, no footprints. The rain had done its damage. Theories began to swirl. Could she have been meeting someone she knew? Was she trying to get somewhere specific? Friends told police they had never heard her talk about running away. Investigators examined her school life, looking for signs of bullying or trouble, but found nothing that explained her disappearance. By the end of the first week, more than 9,000 man-hours had been poured into the search. Helicopters, ATVs, and on-foot teams had scoured a 2-mile radius around her last known location. Every abandoned building in the area was opened and checked. Dozens of ponds were dragged. Still, nothing. As the days turned into weeks, the case began to shift from a frantic search to a methodical investigation. Detectives pulled phone records, checked registered sex offenders in the region, and knocked on doors far outside Shelby. The FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team created a profile: Asha's personality, her habits, her likely reactions under stress. Her parents, Harold and Ikila, gave tearful interviews, pleading for her safe return. "She's our baby," her mother said, voice breaking on camera. "If you have her, please, just bring her home." But as February turned to March, hope began to fade. There were no ransom notes, no confirmed sightings, no physical evidence to chase. It was as if Asha had stepped into the woods that night and disappeared into thin air. The Degree family refused to give up. They left the porch light on every night. They kept her room exactly as it had been the night she left. The bed neatly made, her stuffed animals arranged just so. The town still prayed, searched, and speculated. But the truth was grim. For the first time, the possibility that Asha might never come home alive was creeping into people's minds. By early 2001, nearly a year had passed since 9-year-old Asha Degree walked out of her home and into the cold, rainy darkness. For her family, every day since had been a cycle of hope and heartbreak. They clung to the belief that she was alive somewhere, that maybe she'd been taken in by someone who didn't know her story, that maybe one day she'd come walking back through the front door. The investigation had never stopped. Detectives chased every lead, from tips about possible sightings in neighboring states to calls from psychics who claimed to see her location. None of it panned out. The case seemed frozen in time. Then, on August 3rd, 2001, a call came in that would jolt the investigation back to life. Construction workers in Burke County, about 26 miles north of Shelby, were digging along the edge of a rural road, preparing the ground for a new housing project. Their shovels struck something strange in the soil. A small black book bag wrapped tightly in a plastic trash bag. At first they thought it was garbage, but when they opened it, they saw it contained children's clothing and other items. The sheriff's office was called immediately. The bag and its contents were taken into evidence. Investigators quickly confirmed what the Degree family had feared. The backpack belonged to Asha. The discovery was baffling for several reasons. First, the location. Burke County was in the opposite direction from where Asha had last been seen walking. If she had been headed south along Highway 18 that night, how had her belongings ended up nearly 30 miles north? Second, the condition of the items. They were buried, wrapped to protect them from the elements, suggesting they had been deliberately hidden. The backpack contained clothing that matched items Asha was believed to have taken with her, but also items that her parents didn't recognize, including a New Kids on the Block t-shirt and a children's book from her school library that had never been checked out to her. This raised more disturbing questions than answers. Who buried her things? Why were there objects in the bag that didn't belong to her? And most importantly, where was Asha now? The site was thoroughly searched. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Investigators dug through the surrounding soil, scanned the area with metal detectors, and walked the woods in widening circles. But there was nothing else. No bones, no hair, no scraps of fabric beyond what was in that bag. To the Degrees, the news was a crushing blow. It was like losing her all over again, her mother later said. The backpack's discovery confirmed what they had feared. Someone had taken their daughter, but it also meant she could have been alive long after the night she disappeared. For investigators, the backpack became the most critical piece of evidence in the case. It told them that whoever took Asha had moved her belongings and had the presence of mind to hide them far from the original search area. It meant the person was familiar with the region, maybe even local, and it meant they were still out there. But the trail went cold again. Despite renewed media coverage, no one came forward with new information. The FBI and state investigators re-interviewed old witnesses, revisited timelines, and even traveled out of state to follow up on distant leads. Each time, hope rose, and then fell. The backpack went into an evidence locker. The file on Asha Degree grew thicker, filled with reports, maps, and interviews. And as the one-year anniversary of her disappearance passed, the Degree family gathered at their church, holding hands and praying for the same thing they had prayed for since Valentine's Day 2000, for their little girl to come home. In the years that followed the discovery of Asha Degree's backpack, the investigation never truly stopped, but it also never found the breakthrough everyone was desperate for. Detectives came and went, case files grew heavier, and each February, the Degree family marked another year without their daughter. Every anniversary brought renewed attention. Local news stations ran segments showing Asha's face alongside age progression images, computer-generated guesses at what she might look like as a teenager, then as a young woman in her 20s. Her smile was the same, her eyes unchanged. Somewhere out there, maybe she was still alive. That hope was what kept her parents going. The Cleveland County Sheriff's Office kept the case active. The FBI maintained Asha on its database of missing children. In 2015, they released an age-progressed image showing her at age 25, hoping someone might recognize her. Tips trickled in, some from across the country, but each lead ended the same way. Dead ends, mistaken identities, or information that couldn't be verified. Then, in 2016, investigators revealed a clue they had kept secret for years. Not long after Asha disappeared, two separate witnesses had seen her getting into the cab of a green, early 1970s model Ford Thunderbird or Lincoln Mark IV along Highway 18. The driver was never identified. Why the FBI waited so long to release this information remains unclear, but it reignited interest in the case. Perhaps someone had seen that car before. Perhaps it belonged to someone in Shelby or nearby. Detectives also began re-examining the strange items found in Asha's backpack, especially the New Kids on the Block t-shirt and the children's book from her school library. Who had given her those? Could they be traced? They put out calls to the public, asking anyone with knowledge of those items to come forward. But once again, silence followed. For the Degree family, The hardest part wasn't just the not knowing. It was living in the same town where their daughter vanished. Every trip to the grocery store, every walk through church on Sunday, they wondered, was the person who took her here walking among them? Did they see her parents on the news each year and feel nothing? Or worse, did they feel pride in what they'd done? Through it all, Harold and Ikila refused to give up. They created the Asha Degree Foundation, dedicated to finding missing children and raising awareness. Each year on the anniversary of her disappearance, they lead a walk along the same route she is believed to have taken that night, starting at their home and ending near the spot where she was last seen. People from the community join them, holding candles, wearing shirts with Asha's face, promising to keep her name alive.